And I'll invite you to rise in body or spirit as you're able for the processing in of the family. You may be seated.
When I was a boy each week, on Sunday I would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two. Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still. But now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven second-rate hand-me-down, but now I'm walking with a reverent air. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Read a questioning child's face. Say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come. Say it's not a sacrament. I tell you it can't be done. This morning outside I stood. I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then, 'cause everything's a holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven second-rate hand-me-down, but I'm walking with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Everything is holy now.
Good afternoon, and welcome. I'm Reverend Leslie Mills, and we are so grateful for the many ways you might be joining us today, here in St. Paul at Unity Church-Unitarian, or virtually through our live stream on YouTube. On behalf of the family, I want to express our thanks to those of you in person for wearing the provided KN95 mask throughout your time in the building, both for your own safety and for the safety of those around you who are at risk. Especially for a gathering such as this one, it is important that we take extra care of one another. We are gathered here today to remember Mike Pfaffinger, a gentle soul with a great spirit, and to celebrate the love and kindness with which he blessed the world in the time he was able to be with us. In 2019, I was connected with Mike and Gail to officiate their wedding ceremony, and I had the chance to meet their sons, Jack and Joe and Jack, as well as many of the rest of the family. And it was with great sorrow that I learned of Mike's passing a couple weeks ago when I was invited to lead today's service. Those of you who were there 2 years ago will remember the energy and the joy that swept us all up that day. Mike had only been diagnosed with cancer 6 weeks prior to their wedding, and so there was a certain awareness, an extra pulse of heartache to the poignancy of the vows, where they promised to love and care for each other, to be trustworthy and encourage one another, to laugh and grow together in mind and spirit, and to bring comfort in times of struggle and sorrow. And at the end of those vows, I asked them, do you promise to cherish one another and be grateful for every day together? And they said, I do. I promise all of this from my heart and for the rest of our lives. And I've learned since then that for these two, those were easy vows to make. Not simple, not without effort, but easy to offer freely to one another, because it was already who they were together. And so today, dearly beloved, we are gathered here in memory of Mike, to share stories from across his life, to stitch together our memories and see the size of the cloth, the rich tapestry that it makes. In Unitarian Universalist congregations, we light a chalice at the beginning of our service to remind us of our purpose in coming together to be a beacon of hope for all those who come seeking it. And so we light our chalice today in gratitude for Mike and for all the ways he touched our hearts and our lives and changed them for the better. We gather here to remember, to celebrate the story we called Mike Pfaffinger, and to recognize all the ways that his legacy lives on in our lives and in our hearts. We gather here to recognize this integral shift in our lives. This is a ceremony to mark the time between the time with Mike and the time without Mike. It makes real the experience of what we call passing away. We gather here to grieve, to allow ourselves to feel and to mourn. It is not a time for a stiff upper lip, for keeping calm or staying stoic, locking that grief away where no one can see it or know it or share it. This is the time we've set aside to acknowledge the enormity of our loss. We choose to lift up our stories and celebrate Mike's life, yes, but don't let that fool you. The depth of loss is very real, and it will come upon us as it will. There is no single way to grieve and no single time. I know that you who loved Mike have been grieving already in your own way. And I'll just add that there are tissues in the pews for a reason, and that's so that you can use them. Maybe you've already discovered that grief is not a linear process, and its messiness will inconvenience you, whether today's or in days yet to come. And this is normal. And those are the moments to reach out to someone else who's feeling Mike's absence. This is the human solace that we can offer one another. Don't miss out on that chance for connection by hiding your grief away. And if you know someone else is feeling grief acutely, don't hold yourself back out of a misguided notion of privacy or wanting to avoid awkwardness. Reach out and let them know you're there and that their grief isn't a burden that they need to bear alone. Ask to hear the stories. Jamie Anderson wrote, "Grief is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, in that hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go." And as time goes on, the grief will not get smaller. Indeed, that would not be a fitting tribute to Mike. Rather, the grief will remain and your life will grow larger around it, changing shape to make room for this love with no place to go. But we can give it a place to go when we share it with one another and thereby lessen the burden by dividing it among loving hearts. Will you join me in a moment of prayer? Spirit of life, holy presence that connects and surrounds us, deep mystery that existed at the beginning of time, which we call by many names, the most important of which is love. We know you are with us, and we take comfort in that knowing. We hold in that love Mort Kane, Janet's father, and Joe and Jack's grandpa, who underwent open heart surgery yesterday morning. He's doing well, but is unable to be here today. May his recovery be swift and gentle on both body and spirit. And we also hold Mike's friend, Chris Schmid, and his family as they mourn the sudden loss of his brother. Under the vast spiral of time and space, surrounded by the simple blessings of a community of care and love, we prepare to bring our memories of Mike. Give us the courage to look at our own lives so that each day yet to come we find more compassion, more understanding, more of the loving kindness that is the legacy of the man we knew. Remind us to cherish one another so that we use our lives to connect instead of dismiss, and lead ourselves to the possibility of being remembered as Mike will be remembered. We give thanks for Mike. He lives on in the spirit that surrounds us, and his memory dwells deeply in our hearts. We're grateful for the time we shared with him. We are grateful to have been in his orbit. As we enter into this time of remembrance, may we truly set aside all the rush and bustle that brought us here. All the tasks are put on hold. There is nothing more important to tend to now. You are here. Let us find a breath to pause for this one sacred moment so we can be fully present with one another and give our whole heart in tribute to Mike Pfaffinger. May it be so, and amen. I'll now invite us to join in reading responsively the text "We Need One Another" by George E. Odell, which can be found printed on the first page of your order of service, right on the inside cover. I will read the lines in regular font, and you can respond with the words in italics, and we'll follow this reading with a moment of silence and contemplation. We need one another when we would mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. We need one another when we come to die, and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
Said we'd walk together, baby, come what may, that come the twilight, should we lose our way. If as we're walking, a hand should slip free, I'll wait for you. Should I fall behind, wait for me.
We swore we'd travel, darling, side by side. We'd help each other to stay in stride. But each lover's steps fall so differently. but I'll wait for you. And if I should fall behind, wait for me. Now everyone dreams of a love that's lasting and true, but you and I know what this world can do. So let's make our steps clear, that the other may see. And I'll wait for you. If I should fall behind, wait for me.
There's a beautiful river in the valley ahead. Beneath the oak's bough, soon we will be wed. Should we lose each other in the shadow of the trees, I'll wait for you. Should I fall behind, wait for me.
Darling, I'll wait for you. Should I fall behind, wait for me. I'll wait for you. Should I fall behind, wait for me.
Reading of instructions by Arnold Crompton. When I have moved beyond you in the adventure of life, gather in some pleasant place and there remember me with spoken words old and new. Let a tear, if you will, but let a smile come quickly, for I have loved the laughter of life. Do not linger too long with your solemnities. Go, eat, and talk when you can. Follow a woodland trail. Climb a mountain. Walk along a wild seashore. Chew the thoughts of some book which challenges your soul. Use your hands some bright day to make a thing of beauty, or to lift someone's heavy load. Though you mention not my name, though no thought of me crosses your mind, I shall be with you. For these have been the realities of the life for me. And when you face some crisis with anguish, when you walk alone with courage, when you choose your path of right, I shall be very close to you. I have followed the valleys. I have climbed the heights of life.
We need one another, just as surely as we need air or food or water. Our lives are made up of the tangle of our relationships, the times we reach out and the times we are held in return, which make up the memories we share and the love we leave behind when we're gone. I asked Mike's family and friends to reach out for written remembrances from other loved ones, and we were blessed with pages of stories. And while I had to edit them down for length, you can find the full text printed out in the parish hall with the photos following the service. Despite the many voices contributing to this collage, you probably won't be surprised to hear that there were many common threads. Mike was described by many as special, as having a strength and goodness that both comforted and inspired those around him. He was tenacious and curious and full of adventure, from his earliest years to this one. Mike cared deeply about the people around him, savoring his life and his loves until the end. To know him was to love him. And here are some excerpts from the memories that were shared. From John Ross, his brother-in-law, I want to thank Mike for making my sister Gail so happy and in love over the last 7 years. And from Janet Kane, I will forever miss and be grateful for my dear friend, Path. He was a loving father to our 2 boys and modeled kindness, calm, humility, and strength. He was there for us always, humored us with his one-liners, and loved us unconditionally. We will forever love and miss him. From Millie Marion, Gail's mom, the last time I spoke with Mike, again I saw a man of strength and humility. While seeing my distress at his illness, he graciously replied, "Millie, it's okay, it's okay," adding amen to a prayer in his regard. God love you, Mike. I do. From Karen Johnson, his sister, I'm so grateful for our trip to Tennessee in April. It was such a special trip filled with much love and laughter and great food, too. I'm also happy that I came to Minnesota in the fall to spend a week with Mike and Gail. We spent a lot of time driving to and from Rochester, but just being able to do that, talk, hang out, it meant so much. From Kate Pfaffinger. One of the things that was really remarkable about both Mike and Gail, especially in this last difficult year, was how committed they were to enjoying every good moment. As soon as the infection or pain or some other nasty symptom lifted, they would kiss and laugh and joke in the most lighthearted way. It really was astounding. It was as if they had a pact that they were not going to waste any of the good moments. During Mike's last hospitalization, one evening when Mike was finally feeling a bit better despite his racing heart rate, Gail suggested we practice laughing yoga, just letting loose with the deepest, most authentic belly laugh you can muster. Mike was game, so there were the 3 of us laughing uproariously in his tiny room across from the nurse's station on the palliative care unit. Each time his heart rate would slow a bit, getting closer to a normal range. Mike, ever the scientist, wanted to repeat the experiment to verify the results. More gales of laughter, pun intended. From Bob Pfaffinger, his brother. Mike was only 5 when I left home for college, but I did get to see him wrestle at the state tournament, and I got to be the proud big brother. Later, when he was going to the U of M, I helped him get a position as a lot man at Lupient Oldsmobile. It was just for one summer, but I saw him frequently, and we had him over to dinner on several occasions. It was the first time I got to really communicate with him. He was goal-oriented and had a career path in mind, and I knew then that he was going to be fine. From Mary Vogt, his sister. Mike was a little tyke in a household of bigger kids. So as the caboose, he sometimes felt lost in the shuffle. So he went through a short phase of repeated attempts to run away. I remember once searching in the groves and the snowbanks adjacent to the farmhouse, and once he packed a brown paper sack and announced to me that he was running away. When I said, "Well, let me see what you're bringing with you," Ever the planner, the 4-year-old man for all seasons, had in his bag his winter coat, his swim trunks, and an unwrapped peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I gave him a hug and convinced him to stay that time. From Kate Pfaffinger, his sister, Mike was persistent, sometimes stubbornly so. An early indication of this trait was the epic tricycle ride. Sometimes when he felt older siblings were not including him enough, he would hop on his tricycle and head down the road, often to the neighbors just a quarter mile away. And perhaps assuming that that's where he'd gone again, alarms were not sounded until an aunt on a farm 3 miles and a couple turns down the road away called to say that Mike had arrived on his tricycle. A little guy traveling on a tricycle gets 3 miles down a gravel road. Persistence, determination, grit, and perhaps some grime. I'm sure he slept really well that night. From Jessica Folk-Perlberg, his niece, Mike was thoughtful and on the calm and quiet side in our loud, raucous, loving family. You could see that engineer's brain working. Mike was so purely kind, and he showed up and was present for all those he loved. On a family trip, when Regan was 2, we were on a hike up a little mountainside, and the trail got too steep and rocky for her stroller. So he just scooped her up and carried her on his shoulders, all the way up the mountain, then back down again. It was a warm day, and she was heavy, but that's just who he was. On my last little family hike with Mike and Gail this past winter, Mike joyfully put up with my 3 kids pelting him with snowballs in a pretty lopsided snowball fight. And then he took quiet time to build a tiny snowman with Eli, who so needs and loves those little one-on-one moments. Mike cared deeply for all his family, friends, and the world around him. From Jim Vogt, his brother-in-law, I was always impressed with Mike's knowledge and interest in professional sports, particularly the Minnesota Vikings. Every time we got together, we'd spend a fair amount of time critiquing the most recent games, analyzing the play calling, and evaluating player personnel. A few weeks before his passing, we spent about a half hour lamenting about the Vikings' efforts, or lack of effort, in a recent loss to the Detroit Lions. Of course, the conversation evolved into reminiscing about past Viking teams and their rise or fall from greatness. And then Mike said, "Can you believe that in my lifetime that I've never seen a Minnesota Viking team win a Super Bowl? As a matter of fact, if the Mayo doctors would put me on a super-duper new cancer drug that would extend my life to age 100, I probably still wouldn't see them win a Super Bowl." Mike was a great guy with a wonderful sense of humor. I'm glad he's no longer in pain, but I'll sure miss him. Hopefully he'll be able to watch a Viking victory in a Super Bowl game from high above at some point in eternity. From Georgie Pfaffinger, his sister-in-law, one of the best things about Mike as my brother-in-law was that he accepted and loved me and others unconditionally. He always had a bear hug for me whenever we got together, and he was always interested in what I was up to, as well as what all our children and grandchildren were doing. I will miss his quick smile and tender heart. I so appreciated that kindness and love from my little brother Mike, LBM. Fly on the wings of an eagle. Mike's brother John shared several stories for you to read after the service, but this one had to be kept. Dear brother, you were the only one to drive the John Deere 4430 into the dredge ditch, crawl into and get lodged into the dual wheels on the 4010, go diving and snorkeling off the toilet into the bathtub, and crawl to the top of our 2-story house on an errantly left extension ladder, and then slide unscathed into the eaves troughs at 3 years old. Mike, you are already missed, but today's goodbye is just for a while. And I'd like to invite Gail and Mary to share their remembrances now.
Mike grew up in a large family. He used to proudly pronounce as a preschooler, "My name is Michael Jophus Pfaffinger." Really? The little guy struggled with Joseph and nailed Pfaffinger? The youngest of 6, Mom always introduced him as her baby, and I'm sure he felt strongly about this before he finally protested when he was approaching 50 and asked her to refrain from using this introduction. Then Kate kindly dubbed him our most youthful sibling. It seems wrong to me that our most youthful sibling should be the first to leave us. Mike grew up in a noisy family. Mike often listened more than he talked. He was a deep thinker. He took a while to formulate his thoughts and express them. And I think often when he was ready to interject, someone in the crowd would unintentionally cut him off, or we'd already be off to another subject. But one learned to never underestimate him. He was an active listener and a close observer of life. He always took it all in. When Mike was little, he used to give me big, long, hard hugs, and he joked that he was trying to squeeze the water out of me. He was more fragile in recent months, so no more tight hugs, but Mike always gave the best hugs and showed us all his love in so many ways. Although quiet, Mike had so many personal strengths that shone through in the way he lived. I'm going to share some remembrances that highlight some of those good qualities. Mike was kind. Our mom always used to say, if you can't say anything good about someone, don't say anything at all. And Mike lived this out on the daily. Just days before his passing, I was watching a movie with him, and I was stretched out on the sleeper sofa that had opened into a bed near his chair, leaning on the sofa back kind of awkwardly. Mike, with great effort at this point, as he was becoming a bit foggy, was struggling with the remote on his recliner that was to help him come with a stand and was kind of going up and down. And then with all the strength he could muster as it was getting harder for him to stand up with his walker, with great effort, he got up and started moving toward the TV, and I asked him if he needed something, and he didn't answer, so I thought maybe he wasn't tracking with me. He then bent over and picked up 2 pillows from a stack and threw them to me because he didn't think I looked comfortable. It's a small thing, but if you'd seen how much effort it is, you'd understand how kind it was. Mike was dedicated and hardworking. Sometimes his intense work ethic threw off his work-life balance. He continued his work at Medtronic until just under 9 months ago. His work gave him a real sense of meaning and purpose, and he hoped to finish what he started. He spent many extra hours in the end to make his handoff as smooth as possible for the project team left behind him. He could do no less. Mike was also daring and had a great sense of adventure. As you heard, this started as a toddler when he scaled the rooftop of a big farmhouse. From motorcycle riding in his youth to cliff jumping on the North Shore with the Pfaff extended family, to downhill mountain biking on Spirit Mountain with sons Joe, Jack, Gail, and Jack O at breakneck speed. All the time, the entire biking crew demonstrating skill and agility that even surprised themselves. Mike was loving and loyal. His circle of friends was small, but his ties to them ran deep, even taking calls in the middle of the night when a friend was in need, being a godfather to a friend's son, visiting them in the hospital. His friendships were lifelong. Mike wrote in the gratitude journal that he started last spring, "I'm grateful for 15 years of playing ultimate Frisbee, the relationships and fun and adventures and intense physical workouts, the competition. His skill in the role as a defenseman earned him the nickname Sergeant Rock." And Sergeant Rock missed being more physical as his strength was waning. He really enjoyed the camaraderie and physicality of ultimate frisbee and mountain biking, camping and boating trips in the North Woods with his bros. But he also enjoyed sharing parts of each of their personal lives, far too often a rarity for guys. Mike loved his sons, Joe and Jack. Both he and Jay instilled a love of the outdoors, camping and biking and travels together. In recent years, he regularly reached out to the boys and scheduled times with them whenever he could. Mountain biking together also became a shared love of theirs, and when Mike's illness took away their planned trip to Yosemite and California to do this together, instead of despair, there was reinvention. There was always a plan B, and plan B was a boys' weekend at Sister Kate's cabin on the Brule River, a place they all loved. And instead of biking, they hiked to Lester Park, and Mike drew up the energy to do a longer hike with his boys that day. Sons Joe and Jack. Joe, also a science kind of guy, followed his dad's track into engineering. Joe also took up the hobby of drone photography. This is a great combo of love of technology and love of nature that they both shared. I've seen some of Joe's drone videos. They're amazing. And what is so cool about drone photography is that it lets us see the world from a different perspective, from a bird's eye view. Joe, know that your dad has this view all the time now. Jack had a great sense of adventure, which led to his skateboarding expertise. His open heart and spiritual sense led he and his dad to good talks about the existential and life beyond this earthly plane. Jack shared with me that with the simple act of repaying a friend for a meal brought his friend's Venmo balance to exactly $111. He and his friend were drawn to study the numerology of 111 and investigate its meaning. Jack found that according to numerology, it can signal new beginnings and the ability to move forward and help you on your journey. There were many other significant meanings assigned to it that seemed to apply to the very different but challenging crossroads that both Jack and his dad found themselves at. Jack, know that as you continue to figure out your way forward in the world, your dad is one of your guardians and angels now. Mike loved his family. He showed up for gatherings, big and small, from weddings to birthday parties, singing the now famous birthday song with full enthusiasm. Mike loved his mom. Mom moved up here in 2014, and Mike had the longest drive to her house. But despite his more than full-time working schedule, making time for his sons, his friends, and his dear wife, he still visited Mom nearly every weekend. She always got the boy bump that we called it when he came. She always brightened when Mike walked into the room. I'm going to be excused to grab my water. Sorry. Bring this with me. I was having a Marco Rubio moment. Mike would enjoy the political reference. Even before his cancer, Mike leaned into optimism and hope about everything, about any life challenge. When you asked Mike how things were going, no matter if it was about the personal challenges of a loved one, or his trip out east in July when it rained nearly every day, or his latest CT scan to follow his cancer, he would always answer, well, there was some good and some bad, but mostly good. There was more good than bad. Mike had a very challenging cancer journey, but because Mike and Gail were not prone to complain or dwell in the negative, many of us didn't see how challenging it was at times. That was by design. For those who were able to see it, for those of us able to see it more closely and see just how challenging it was, and seeing Mike and Gail's response to this ever-growing challenge, it speaks volumes to both the depth of their characters and the depth of their love for each other. When the going got tough this summer, They found a way to get and stay positive. From the online resilience classes they took at Mayo, where, as Mike put it, it was to help us stay mentally and emotionally on the top floor instead of ruminating in the emotional basement. To their declared nights of fun at home, where they would imbibe a bit and plan a special movie or walk together, or even hospital date nights of sort with special food that Gail brought in, or something upbeat to watch on Roku, to practicing laughing yoga. There was most certainly anger and frustration experienced, but Mike and Gail did not languish in anger or sadness. They continued to find joy in every day in so many ways. In the roughest spate in August and September, Mike was hospitalized 4 times within 2 weeks for treatment, radiation treatments, procedure to stabilize his spine, pain management, pneumonia. In the throes of this one evening, we were discussing these accelerated challenges, and Mike said, "I keep asking God to give me the strength to bear this." And I thought he was not answering my prayers. But then I realized that you, Gail, Mary, and Kate, and all the doctors and nurses working so hard to help me, you are all the answer to my prayers. This was Mike's spiritual practice of gratitude in action. He expressed gratitude often, not just to the 3 of us, but also to Karen, who flew out to spend a week, to Jay, ever the dear friend and mother of his sons, who also helped out in countless ways, to all of you who helped and visited and reached out in any way you could during COVID. Mike was determined and brave because within a week or 2 of this longest siege at Mayo, he was home and hiking again. He was the king of rallies. The same persistence and determination that drove Mike to go 3 miles on a tricycle kept him walking and going these past few months. Using the minimal of assistance of hiking poles and usually walking on level ground, but with his intense determination, he was also going down the steep hill to his favorite backyard Cedar Lake loop as recently as early November. He loved Gail, and nothing was too hard for Gail where Mike's joy or comfort was concerned. She had Mike's super recliner brought down to Rochester for him when he was completing his outpatient radiation of his spine. She bought a plethora of countless pillows and chair cushions to cushion whatever hurt. They experimented on endless combinations of these. With both of them ever the scientists, there were many experiments. Pain really had become a frequent companion, but Mike wanted to manage this with a minimum of medications because he did not want to be foggy, but as cognizant and present for his remaining life as he could. So Gail took a deep dive into pain management, not just being knowledgeable about his meds, but knowing what worked for him, what uplifted him, and what calmed him. Gail and Mike always liked to close the day with something positive, so this was the narrative playing in their head when they went to sleep. They would either end the day with a couple episodes of Ted Lasso, an upbeat movie, or the Playing for Change music YouTube videos that Mike loved, thus the inspiration for the peace train that will close today's service. We will walk out with a positive energy, grateful for the time we had with Mike, grateful for his release from his ailing body. This man has jumped aboard the peace train.
I am going to use the word deep a lot in my remembrances about Mike today because depth was the essence of Mike for me. Mike and I met online 7 years ago. For those who have had the pleasure of dating online, you know you are supposed to choose some kind of nickname or handle that in a word or two defines yourself. For some, this was a throwaway, often kind of silly or even worse, bragging. Leave it to Mike that the online name he gave himself captured his essence. Mike's online handle was Deeply Live Laugh. I would learn that this captured him perfectly. Well, almost, because he left out one important word, love. He wasn't showy, and he was incredibly humble. Mike was so special for so many reasons, but for me, most of all, because he lived so deeply, laughed so deeply, and loved so deeply. This became more evident to me in some strange way as our world became smaller, as we dealt with the dual challenges of cancer and the pandemic. Living in this kind of weird existence for him crystallized what was most important in his life. And for me, how special it was to be one of the lucky ones who was loved by Mike. Over the last 2 years, geographically, our footprint was very small. But in the way we lived and in the things Mike focused on in the end, he lived a very big life, as he always had and wanted to do. At the beginning of COVID, we were disappointed about the things on his bucket list that he wouldn't get to do now, like mountain biking in Hawaii. Yet in the end, we realized there were so much more important things on his bucket list, and these he accomplished fully and deeply. One of these more true bucket list items was spending time with close family and friends, saying the words too often we are too shy or afraid to say to each other, or that we think we'll have time to say at some unspecified time in our assumed future years. Cancer stinks, but it cracks your heart open too, and dispels the myth that there will always be more time to tell people how much we love them. I am happy to say that at the end of his life, Mike, who was so quiet and reserved and wasn't much one for small talk, left nothing truly important about life and love unsaid to those closest to him. And it is some consolation now that those of us who loved him so dearly got to tell him how much we loved him and why. I want you to know that those words that Mike heard, and Tony and Jess's recent home performance for us as well, were music to his soul. Another incredibly important item on Mike's bucket list was to have seen his boys grow and thrive. Joe and Jack, he was so proud of both of you. He saw Joe completing a college degree in the same field he himself had and develop great friendships and meet a great gal named Gracie. He saw Jack make huge strides in the past year, living on his own and taking on a really challenging job with diligence and enthusiasm. But most of all, Jack and Joe, he was proud of what kind of people you had grown into. Both of you are so kind, so loyal, and constant in your caring for others, and so loving, just like him in these ways. I am so sorry your dad won't be here as you both continue to grow and experience new life milestones. But know that your dad believed his soul would live on and that he would always be by your side. And the rest of us who miss your dad so much have the consolation of knowing that there is so much of the best in him that is still on this earth because it lives on in each of you. Finally, one of the things on Mike's bucket list was to experience a great love story. Something most of you probably don't know about Mike is how much of a romantic he was. The man loved love, and he loved a good love story more than almost anything. Something he kept on the down low was that his favorite movies were not action movies, but romances. Comedy, drama, it didn't matter, as long as it was a great love story and had a happy ending. To show you what I mean by this, I'll tell you a little story. One night we were home about a year ago, and he was scrolling through movie options on TV, and after looking at about a dozen trailers, he came upon a movie called Feast of Love. And at that moment, I said to myself, there is no way he is going to scroll past this one. And I loved him for that. Sure enough, he played the trailer and looked at me and said, "This one looks good." Until the end, and especially at the end, we kept telling each other that despite everything, we were the lucky ones to have found a true love and a soulmate. My wise friend Eva told me shortly after Mike was diagnosed with just cancer in August 2019 that it will be the narrative we tell ourselves about this that will define our experience of this journey. A journey that isn't over yet because now we have the grieving. Here's the narrative I tell myself. I know that Mike had cancer 7 years ago when I met him. He already was exhibiting the symptoms. We just didn't know what it was then. I believe I came into his life so that I could be here with him on that journey, live a true love story as we did, and be there with him to love and care for him to the end, which I did. I actually loved him more every day until I didn't think anyone could love anyone more than I loved Mike. And we both knew that. Gratitude in the end got us through. When my dad died when I was about Joe and Jack's age, I could never have felt gratitude. For quite a while, I felt angry and very cheated. Joe and Jack, no doubt, you deserved more years with your dad and he with you. At the same time, I am so glad that you know how much he loved you and will always love you. And I am so glad for you that you got the chance to tell him how much you love him and always will. He was so grateful for that. He was so grateful for that. For me, I know that I will have hard days, but Mike taught me optimism and positivity by example, and we learned about gratitude together. The narrative I choose to tell myself today is that I wasn't supposed to have Mike 30 years, but only got him for a quarter of that. I was supposed to have him for 7 years, and I got 150% of that. My hope for you all is that you will feel the abundance of Mike's love forever, that you will remember him as a person who lived quietly but deeply, who laughed deeply, and who loved deeply, that my and your tribute to him will be to live our lives like that, to live deeply, laugh deeply, and most of all, love deeply.
For this next part, we'll need to apologize to our online guests. For our next song, The Only Child by Jackson Browne, we'll be pausing our online streaming for a few minutes due to copyright protections. But you're welcome to listen to the song at home if you have access, and the live stream of the service will resume in just a few minutes at the end of the song.
Maybe I can see over the podium. This next reading is a special request from me. It's not a sweet poem. It's not an easy one. It's a really challenging poem about loss and the sadness and the pain of loss. But it's also about compassion and how it's possible for big losses and big hurts to teach our hearts about big compassion and simple kindness. There have been stories today about Mike's kindness, and he was indeed a very kind man. But Mike was also usually quick to express deep down gratitude for the goodness in his life, to offer a heartfelt thank you when he was on the receiving end, when the doctors and nurses and so many others went the extra mile, which was often, when anyone helped him out, visited, made him laugh, joined him in yet another appointment, brought him food, sustenance, and got him just the right pillow. And in these last couple of years, Mike had so many opportunities to be grateful because we all were, the recipients of so much kindness, so many amazing acts of generosity. And whether you're having a good day or going through the really hard stuff, but perhaps especially then, simple kindness can be such a balm to your heart. So on Mike's behalf, this reading is dedicated to all those helpers, to all those kind people. On Mike's behalf, this next reading is for all of you. And I like to imagine that Mike is out there somewhere encouraging all of us to keep up the good work on his behalf. Kindness, a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all of this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking this bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend.
At this point in the service, we might be wondering, what is there to say that has not been said? The memories so generously shared and the gifts of music and readings are already filling our hearts. You've already heard about his adventurous spirit and his love of science. You know firsthand about his deep caring for those lucky enough to be in his orbit. But I was asked to take a moment to talk about another part of Mike, the part underneath all of those stories and experiences already shared. Mike had a rich and complex spiritual life, as one would have to navigate the delicate balance of living knowingly and fully with a terminal disease. At the heart of Mike's spirituality was a core belief in connection, expressed through gratitude and joy. He had a big view of the world and experienced everything as being interconnected. He brought that innate curiosity for the world around him to his inner life as well. The last book he was reading was Living Buddha, Living Christ by Thich Nhat Hanh, and he watched so many videos about near-death experiences and what people may have brought back from that. As a scientist himself, he found that the spiritual world could be explained with scientific principles, not in a way that took out the mystery and wonder of it all, but in a way that affirmed and enhanced it. The universe to Mike was constantly changing and expanding and full of wonder. Every part of that balance was affected by the smallest gesture, and so it seemed good to be mindful of what kind of gestures we're making to change that balance. It became Mike's practice to choose kindness, thoughtfulness, care, compassion, and love, because the universe always needs more of that. And to understand this religious naturalism, this scientific spirituality, consider this. The second law of thermodynamics tells us about the conservation of energy. Energy exists, and it cannot unexist. It comes from somewhere, perhaps changes form, and then goes somewhere else. That's what energy does. It cannot come from nothing, and therefore it also cannot disappear. And so we could apply that principle to the question of a human soul, because Mike did believe in souls. And a soul is the energy that animates us while we're alive in this world, and so if we are made of energy, which we are, then that energy had to come from somewhere before we were born. And it follows that our energy has to go somewhere after we die. That doesn't mean we know the answer to that mystery, where it goes, where it came from, but Mike had a profound sense that there is something on the other side. That core belief comforted him, knowing that even after he died, he would not be gone. And if there's any way to guide our own soul when we reach the other side, I know that Mike is guiding his to be present with you, continuing to offer that unconditional love and support to the people he cares about even after death. If there's a way, Mike will find it, courageously, tenaciously, lovingly. With this spiritual tie to the natural world, it seems fitting that Mike's memorial service should land today on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. It's the point at which our planet, tilted on its axis away from the sun, is turned most fully into the darkness, and I offer that as a blessing. The winter solstice is a chance to reflect and to rest, to let down the bustle of the daytime. It's a time to gather and tell stories of hope and courage, which we have been doing all afternoon. The winter solstice also marks the turning point. After the longest night, each night after that gets shorter and the days get longer and the world keeps turning until the warmth is back and the world is ready to grow again. So I invite you to cherish this solstice blessing and allow it to stir your own curiosity and wonder, which were at the center of Mike's life. As with the universe, so with our lives. And as Mike used to say, there's some good, some bad, but more good than bad. And I'll close with Those words from Naomi Shiabnai. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes everywhere with you like a shadow or a friend. In every moment of kindness, may we remember Mike's legacy, his gentleness and goodness, his thoughtfulness and his curious mind, his commitment and dedication, and most of all, his love. May Mike's legacy go with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. At the rising of the sun and at its setting, we remember him.
Song is a simple, beautiful Gaelic blessing, and it honors how Mike found deep peace in nature. And maybe all of us can find that peace as well there, and maybe a piece of Mike too. Jenny and I will sing this through a couple times. We'll sing on the melody first, and then Jenny will join in harmony, and then feel free to join us if you'd like. Deep peace of the rolling waves to you, deep peace of the silent stars, deep peace of the blowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth. Let peace, let peace, let peace fill your soul. May peace, may peace keep you whole. Deep peace of the rolling waves to you, deep peace of the silent stars, deep peace of the blowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth. Let peace, let peace, let peace fill your soul. May peace, may peace, may peace keep you whole. Deep peace of the rolling waves to you, deep peace of the silent stars, deep peace of the blowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth. Let peace, let peace, let peace fill your soul. May peace, may peace, may peace keep you whole. Deep peace of the rolling waves to you, deep peace of the silent stars, deep peace of the blowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth. Let peace, let peace, let peace fill your soul. May
I'd like to invite our tech team to come forward and start setting up the screen up here for our closing song at the end of the service. But first, I'd like to explain a few logistics while they work behind me here. Once again, I apologize to the live stream portion of our service. It will be ending in a couple of minutes following the benediction. And again, for copyright reasons, we are not able to play our postlude for the online guests. However, we would encourage you to search on YouTube for Peace Train by Cat Stevens, specifically the version with Playing for Change. That's what we will be watching in a moment here. This song was included in the service at Mike's request, and it was the only thing he asked for, so we hope that you have a chance to let its message speak to your heart. And for those of you present in the sanctuary, the family thanks you for your patience while we get this equipment already set up and running. So we will be showing the video on the screen here after the benediction and the live stream ends. I'll close our time today with words from John O'Donohue's blessing on the death of the beloved. Though we need to weep your loss, you dwell in that safe place in our hearts where no storm or night or pain can reach you. Your love was like the dawn brightening over our lives, awakening beneath the dark a further adventure of color. The sound of your voice found for us a new music that brightened everything. Whatever you enfolded in your gaze quickened in the joy of its being. You placed smiles like flowers on the altar of the heart. Your mind always sparkled with wonder at things. Though your days here were brief, your spirit was alive, awake, and complete. We look toward each other no longer from the old distance of our names. Now you dwell inside the rhythm of breath, as close to us as we are to ourselves. Though we cannot see you with outward eyes, we know our soul's gaze is upon your face, smiling back at us from within everything to which we bring our best refinement. Let us not look for you only in memory, where we would grow lonely without you. You would want us to find you in presence, beside us when beauty brightens, when kindness glows, and music echoes eternal tones. May you continue to inspire us, to enter each day with a generous heart, to serve the call of courage and love until we see your beautiful face again in that land where there is no more separation, where all tears will be wiped from our mind, and where we will never lose you again. May it be so, and amen. Blessed be. Go in peace.